Hey everybody, it's Keith with the L1 Automotive Training Channel. And in today's video, we're going to go over part 2 of the Autel MS919 unboxing. Don't forget, you can submit all of your questions to TechQuestions at l1training.com. It doesn't matter if it's about tools and equipment or a specific car you're working on, send your questions there. Alright, so there you go. The screen at 9.7 inches is actually the same size as the 908. Now, I'm upgrading from an MS908, not even a P version, so I don't even have a J2534 device that came with mine. So going to the 919 was not much of a leap when it came to hardware size. Now, the Ultra is 12 inches. My concern with that was space. Being in a mobile van, my buddy Tommy Levy, he showed me pictures of his Ultra in comparison to like his IM608, and that thing is a monster. So I'm really glad I stuck with the 9.7 inch screen. One thing you'll notice that's missing in comparison is the Ethernet port. The 919, the 909, and the Ultra, I believe, all of them are absent a Ethernet port. I don't know what the purpose was. I just assumed that I didn't find enough use out of it to put one in there. And I'll agree with that. Very rarely would I ever use the Ethernet port on mine for internet. Obviously, with a wireless card, you would use that. So let's take a short little walk around the tool, and I'll show you some of the stuff that's going on in the software. So looking at the main page, there's not much difference between the 919 and like 908 series tools. You can see we have our diagnostic, service, and ADAS tabs, and our data manager tab. Now we're going to touch a minute on the measurement tab here in a minute, but let's take a look at the data manager tab and we can see what's going on in there. And again, this didn't change much. So we have our vehicle history, our workshop information, our customer database, and then of course our image and PDF. Now the image and PDF sections are where you would store if you took a screenshot or you took a like pre or post scan report. That's where our PDF would be stored. Or sorry, that's where our report would be stored in the PDF. So let's go back to the screen. If we scroll over and look, there's, some demo stuff, Max Viewer, all the stuff that's been in the original tool. Not a whole lot going on here. Some of the quick links, they've added a few extra ones, and of course your remote desktop option. But if we go to our measurement tab, this is where we've got quite a bit going on. You can see we have the oscilloscope, the multimeter, the waveform generator, and one labeled OBD. So let's take a minute and take a look into some of these functions because there's a lot going on here. Then going into the OBD function, we can look and see what this allows us to do is scope one of the actual pins off of the DLC that's either for the high speed CAN, low speed. There's a lot of options. We can go in and select which signal we're looking for, even stuff like individual K-line or class 2 data. And we can scope these pins directly off the DLC without using one of the channels of our 4-channel oscilloscope that's built right into the VCMI. So super awesome feature. Now if we go into the waveform generator, here we can see that we're actually able to create a waveform out of the multimeter ports that are on the back of the VCMI. This is kind of cool because we could replicate a square wave. We can even do like a 60-tooth -2 to replicate like a crankshaft signal on a vehicle to see if we can actually get injector pulse. And for me as a mobile diagnostician, this is an invaluable tool. It kind of allows me to prove out my suspected failure point right there in the bay and kind of move on with my day because I've got to be quick with what I do. The multimeter function I'm actually going to cover in another video, so let's take a quick look at the scope. Now what's neat is if you noticed, I was able to change directly over from the diagnostic screen to the oscilloscope. Now that's one downfall of this 919 versus the Ultra. The Ultra, you're actually able to split screen both the oscilloscope and the scan tool. So that's one function you'll lose with getting the 919 over the Ultra, but for me, it was totally worth it. It's not that often that I have to do that. Now, this particular vehicle was a 3.6 Suzuki that happened to be the same as like an Equinox. I think it was an 08 or 09. The failure point here was on the red trace, which was our intake camshaft position sensor. Something was up with the air gap and it was dropping the signals out. It should have been too narrow and too wide teeth each time. And we continued to find that it would just kind of miscount teeth, which is really odd. You would almost not suspect that out of a bad sensor, but it actually was a bad sensor. So I was just using it as a good test to see how this oscilloscope functioned over like a picoscope that I would use often. Now I will say that I do find that the filtering on the picoscope is significantly better than the Autel, but by no means is the Autel an unusable oscilloscope. This was very usable for this. I diagnosed this vehicle off of this waveform. We gave the shop the option of, hey, try a sensor because it could just be an air gap or a faulty sensor issue. If not, then we're going to have to tear down and take a look at this timing, but I highly doubt that this thing has too narrow teeth and too wide teeth and then randomly misses some of the wider teeth. So we did use this waveform and the oscilloscope here to diagnose this vehicle, and I can say it was very user-friendly. I do not see where the oscilloscope has a PC function yet, like the MP408 did, the older standalone Autel oscilloscope, and I attempted to use the oscilloscope with that software and it did not function. But I can tell you that the software built on the tool here was absolutely great. So as you can see, we're able to go in there and save this waveform. We can enter channel identification information. We can go in there and label stuff. So I actually hooked up to different, both like one bank, then the other, saved the waveforms, was able to bring them back up and look at them and compare them. So it worked really, really well for this, and I was pretty pleased with it. So as I mess more and more with this oscilloscope, I'll bring you more videos with it, and I have one coming up where I'd like to show you some interesting stuff with the multimeter function that I find to be really, really useful. So we'll dive really far into that stuff later. I just kind of wanted to, again, give you more of the part 2 of the unboxing and overview of the tool, and so far I'm highly impressed. Now, this is my by far favorite function of the tool. Now, traditionally, when you would select a vehicle like here, we're connected to a Chrysler 300, you would click auto scan and it would go through and check all the modules and list out fault or no fault. Check out what function they've added now to almost every vehicle, not just Chryslers. Everything I've hooked it up to, including like a 2000 model Maxima, this function has worked so far. We go ahead and select auto scan, and it brings up a physical network topology, and then when you click fault scan at the bottom, it starts to scan each individual module and color codes. So this is a function that on this just happens to be coincidental, we're using it on a Chrysler here, but on the factory Chrysler tool, YTech, they have this, the physical network topology. We can see there's two separate networks denoted there at the bottom with our CAN-C and our IHS, our interior high-speed CAN, and we see modules that are attached to each one. So with this, we can actually see this topology, but this works on all vehicles, not just Chrysler. So this is pretty neat. You can select the individual module and go into it, and this one, we're creating a report. This vehicle, we actually did an ADAS calibration on the front-facing radar, but we wanted to create a report and see how it worked. We saved this, that way we can save all the information for later. And I'll use this vehicle as a case study, one that you'll see a video of later, but for the most part, just the physical topology part was awesome. So the video is creeping up on like 10 minutes now, and there's so much more stuff I can go into with this tool. All I can tell you is that yes, I still use the launch a bunch, but this Autel has started to quickly become my go-to grab. Now, I will say we're going to spend a lot more time with the VCMI, going over some of its features and functions. But what I have proved out for sure is that you can get one of the small, like VC100 dongles and actually attach that to this. So if you don't want to drag out the huge VCMI, which weighs like over a pound, has a huge cable, it's got a metal case, it's pretty heavy. You can get like the Autel VC100, I think is the part number, or I think it's VCI 100 or VC 100. I don't remember what the part number was. I found them on online retailers for about 240 bucks. Or if you already have another like 906 BT or some other Autel tool that has that, you can use that dongle with this. Now, you're not going to have all the functions, like if there's some coding or programming on Benz and BMW products that are built into the tool. I wouldn't suggest you use that. But for your day-to-day, like looking at live data and stuff like that, and you're just trying to keep it down to a smaller interface, absolutely a viable option. But regardless, if that's not that big of an issue with you, the VCMI is an awesome tool, and you guys are going to see a ton more content. So at the time of filming this, I probably have 5 or 6 other videos queued up that I'm working on that I've used it on. I've used the oscilloscope, the multimeter. We've done some ADAS calibrations, done some live data plotting. I'm really impressed. Autel kind of went above and beyond this time and exceeded my expectations. Because you guys know I've been team launch for quite a while just because the bang for the buck was there. But I can tell you that Autel has made the tool worth the money this time around, and I'm pretty excited to see what all I can get done with this, and if it does become my go-to tool. My negatives on it are no Ethernet port, which I did use sometimes, but it was very, very seldom. It was mainly when I was doing big updates. The other thing would be just the overall size in comparison to my launch tools. Like the VCMI is big, and then it is a larger, heavier tablet. But again, I mean, with that comes, battery life, that it's rugged, it feels real nice. So again, there's all kinds of little things there that would go, and as you see more and more videos, you'll kind of see my thoughts on this. But either way, again, we're like 12 minutes in now, so let's cut this off. I expect you guys will see more videos soon. We'll see you next time. And don't forget, if you have questions about tooling or equipment or anything, TechQuestions at l1training.com. I'll put a little link there on the bottom like I always do, and send all your questions there, and I would love to answer them weekly.